Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can officially say it's showtime, baby. Oh, I have been waiting for tonight for so long. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally have the Super Attack animations for Gamma 1 and 2. I am so excited to go through these. Y'all don't know how hyped I have been for Superhero. I think I have been, out of my friend group, easily the most excited person for this to come to Dokkan. I have literally seen the movie 4 times by this point, so needless to say, I think I am pretty prepared to do this animation analysis video. Of course, as per usual, we are going to watch through them one time in regular speed, and then we will go through the frame by frame. By the way, we do have Gamma 1 and 2 in the same video. Obviously, I usually just cover these, as they are in the Twitter videos, how they get re-uploaded. So that's what we're going to do today. I could split them up into 2 videos, but they're already together, bro. We might as well. So let's go ahead and look through these. I am really excited to talk about these. I've watched them through a couple of times now. They are quite interesting, to say the least. There is a lot of really good things about them. There are a couple of little jank moments about them, but overall, I think that they are really, really fantastic and a great representation of these characters. Oh, that shot is so sick. So here's the thing that is really interesting about these as well. They're sort of like a combination of the CGI aesthetic as well as sort of how Dokkan interprets super attacks one time. By the way, look at that rotoscoping. There's going to be a lot of that in today's video. It's so good. They absolutely nailed it for sure with these guys, right? So it's interesting that it's not exactly like the CG style, which is sort of more akin to the AGL Gohan, right? Obviously the free-to-play one. This one, funny enough, thank you Bandai. We talked about this guy recently in an animation analysis video, sort of preparing for the release of these guys. And it's quite interesting to me that they decided to sort of go this route with these two, with making them like almost semi-CGI, I guess would be a good way to put it. I don't think that it looks bad by any means, and I don't know if I would have preferred them to do actual CGI. By the way, sorry if you can hear that, I'm opening my window. But they look really good. Regardless, I'm really a big fan of these guys for sure. So let's go ahead and get into it. By the way, they both have the intros. I think one of them is an attack nullification and the other one is Gamma 1's. I think it's like a attack dodge, or I think one of them is technically nullification. The other one may be a counter. I don't know the specifics on that yet because I haven't read the transitions again. I just heard them offhanded and then went to record this video. But regardless, it doesn't matter because we're looking at the animations and that's what's important. So let's go ahead and hop into it here. Interesting that they start with Gamma 2, but I guess that makes sense because obviously this is sort of thematically correct for the movie. The gun spin, by the way, perfect. Literally, I don't think they could have done it any better. It looks so good. This entire sequence right here, I don't think I have a single bad thing to say about this because it's just so good. It looks so nice, especially with the anime speed lines, right? Like the motion lines that sort of emphasize that on there look really, really good. I think the only thing that I would have loved is if they would have had one more frame in between here. And that is absolutely nitpicking. But of course, since we're, analyzing this, I'm going to talk about it, right? But overall, yeah, really, really good. And the spin itself is absolutely fantastic too. Now, I will say, there is one thing that is a little bit janky about how he moves here, and I think the rest of this is fine. So the cape flowing in the wind looks just fine, but the way his body moves in that transition there that you kind of saw is a little bit janky, if I'm being honest, right? You have his arms sort of go up a little bit, right? Which is, kind of beginning to bend a little bit. And then when his... Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't even go back far enough. There we go. When his body moves and twists a little bit. Yeah, right there, right? This movement of his body feels a little bit off when he goes from here, right, to then... Where is it? There, right? He kind of twists his chest a little bit. I think what they did here for this section specifically, is that they didn't make a separate asset. They just stretched the image. Funny enough, a lot of older Dokkan essays do this because we've talked about this in a bunch of the older ones we've looked at recently on the channel. So it's interesting to me that they decided to go this route of stretching it like this. It looks a little bit strange. It's not like the worst thing in the world, but it's just a little bit off-putting, right? And then you immediately have his chest go to this forward position, and it does feel weird for his whole body to like change position like that so quickly. I don't know. I would have liked if there would have been a little bit more movement on that. But him raising his arm, I think, is fine. I do wish that his head had a little bit more movement here, right? Because I think the arm raise is okay, right? There's enough-ish, right? They definitely could have added a little bit more for him actually bringing it up, but his head changing position so quickly is definitely very off-putting. I saw that and I was like, wait, whoa, slow down, my guy. So yeah, that part is a little bit janky, but I think the rest of it is honestly really, really good. Obviously, after this, we have him get ready into this very goofy pose. I will say I do kind of wish there was more in between this as well, right? Because not only changing perspective on how you're looking at Gamma 2 here, but this is a big pose change, right? Just to do in a flash, right? So I do wish there was a little bit more in between that. However, I think this posing looks really good, right? Moving his arms out to the side, you can see that little bit of animation smearing, right? With him stretching his his arm there, right? You can see that the asset stretches a little bit. It looks so weird looking at it on the frame by frame. It looks like he almost has like Piccolo's arms with the extendo arms. But yeah, it looks pretty good. And then him getting into the actual pose. Look how short his arms look there now. That's kind of funny. Looks really, really good, obviously. And the animation on this part, too, I think is very nice, too. With him getting into the squatted position to, of course, do the kaboom effect. It is, by the way, a really good distraction to have him sort of squat deeper when you have the explosion there, because you're not really noticing him changing from this pose here. By the way, very interesting. They literally just moved the top half of his asset down for having him go down a little bit more rather than just keeping it like this and then changing it to this frame, right? They that looks so weird. It's like they're just lowering him down on a crane. Very interesting. Yeah, definitely a little bit janky on the intro part. But the explosion looks really nice. I think that this fits really well. I like the little effects coming off of it too. And this is cool. Obviously, the lighting is super nice because, of course, it's supposed to be like, you know, the explosion is happening right behind him. And yeah, him getting into pose looks good. I will say I almost feel like it looks a little bit too dark, if I'm being honest with you. Maybe that's just me. I feel like it could be a little bit brighter. But I definitely like the effect of this, obviously referencing in the movie when he first gives the explosion effect to Piccolo. A very cool intro. It's also interesting, too, that they kind of, like, I don't know, combined that from diction sections, because I don't think that that was completely it, right? Like, I think he talks to Piccolo for a little bit, like in this part, and then he does this, right? I don't think it's like all in one sequence, so that's kind of interesting, but that's a good way to do it. So obviously we have Piccolo Super here, and then we have the attack nullification, which looks really, really good. The fade from white, you have Gamma 2 flying in here. All of the little bits of his clothing, by the way, on this look really, really good that are flapping around here. Obviously his cape too. And this is such a nice attention to detail on the background, by the way. This is supposed to be clouds, right, that are he's sort of like zooming past in the sky. And bam, as he comes to a stopping point, you actually see the clouds there, which is a super nice attention to detail for sure. You have him pull back, which just looks kind of choppy in the frame by frame here, but I think in regular motion it looks fine. This effect too looks so nice. The sky darkening, and you have this ball form around Gamma 2, which is obviously, you know, to protect him from getting hit. The glow effect also looks nice. This really does look like the light is sort of coming from the cracks or like the lines that make up this ball, right? Which is super nice. Have the explosion effect come through and hit him. Wow. That is a really cool effect right there. That is definitely a good way to emphasize it, right? These two impact frames here with the red and blue. That is nice. I think this one is probably going to be specifically key-based supers as well. That would only kind of make sense to me, considering the fact that, you know, it was the special beam cannon, and this is usually meant to nullify key-based supers when this type of thing is in Dragon Ball. So that would definitely make sense to me that that is the case, right? This also looks really, really cool with the, like, almost like distortion of the ball around Gamma 2 as the energy's hitting him. That looks really, really nice. I love the way that they sort of have the lines come off of the front of that. The background as well, a little bit of orange, right? They did such a good job with this animation. It looks really, really nice. Okay, so this is really cool too. And I'm gonna say something interesting once we watch through this whole animation about the sprites, because they actually did a halfway decent job with the sprites for this one, I think. This is cool too, because obviously this is when Gamma 1, or Gamma 1, Gamma 2, I'm getting my Gammas mixed up, is standing in the air, right, talking to Piccolo. This is a very cool way to do this shot. I definitely like this a lot. The background looks pretty nice too. That was one thing that I was sort of struck by. I was like, oh wow, that's actually the superhero background. It's kind of a shame that you can't see Piccolo's house, but I think it's like technically right there. Unless that white thing right there is Piccolo's house. I can't really see it from this angle. But anyway, you have him floating in the air. They actually didn't forget to add in the detail of his legs kind of being open a little bit because he's so goofy. He doesn't have them like straight in the air, which is so funny, right? We have him pointing, which, bro, this section right here, right, looks so nice. I don't know what they did in the shading department, but this animation looks just like so crisp, right? And this kind of looks closer to the CG, right? This is kind of what I'm talking about. This section exemplifies it pretty well. The point looks good, by the way. He does twist his arm a little bit there, which I guess looks kind of weird, and there could be something a little bit more in between that, but I think it's okay in full motion, right? This section, I feel like, really kind of emphasizes what I was talking about that sort of like 2.5D effect, right? Where it's not quite CG, but you can tell that it's not quite Dokkan's usual type of animations either. It's sort of a mix of both, right? And I think they do a good job on that. I was really curious to see if they were going to try and mimic the CG style for all of the animations. There is definitely some reference to it here, but I think Dokkan kind of interpreted it in their own way for this. So we have Piccolo standing down there. I was going to mix up Piccolo and Gamma 2. I will say the background in this shot, before we even talk about Gamma 2, is really weird. The way that it sort of like warps in perspective, like I understand it's because it's getting closer to this mountain here, right? But I feel like the way that it looks just feels kind of off to me. It's like not moving in the way that you would think that it would, especially in this like very beginning bit. It almost looks like the land is like shifting, right? They're trying to emulate what they did in the movie, because this was kind of the same effect that they had in Superhero, but I don't think it looked exactly like this. So kind of interesting on that front. But yeah, so we cut to Gamma 2 standing there in the air getting ready to charge at Piccolo, right? He stances up and then flies forward towards Piccolo. This is a really cool angle, by the way. You guys know when I love when they do unique angles like this in Dokkan, right? We have a little bit of a change too, which is nice, because this, I think, is basically just a, you know, static PNG. Obviously, his cloak is moving a little bit. But then you actually have a little bit of an angle change here, right? To sort of emphasize the stretch that you're looking at here, which is also really, really nice. Definitely like that a lot. You get this sort of close-up of Gamma 2's fist, right? As it sort of pans around the camera. And you cut back to this iconic shot. I'm sure most of you recognize this from the trailer, because this was in a bunch of the trailers for the movie, right? And this looks really good. I think that this is another great example of sort of that like effect of mixing the sort of two styles of the movie, right? I think that that looks really, really nice overall. The effects on Gamma 2's fist also look really, really good. You know, I always like to talk about these effects because I always feel like they're super underappreciated in Dokkan, right? This looks really cool with these sort of sparking effects here. It is a little bit weird to see the background like not really moving while the effects are moving and him kind of in place for some of these shots. But yeah, looks really, really cool if I do say so myself. We have a very nice transition, by the way, where once it zooms in, you have his fist go by the screen, right? To transition into the comic book-esque effects when he was getting beaten down by Piccolo in the movie, right? You have the Dokkan! That looks super nice, right? This looks really nice, too, with the way that he's shaded here. Very, very good-looking, far away asset right there. You have him fly past here, and I think the background looks really nice here with it spinning around, because in this section of the movie, the whole camera was kind of spinning around them, so that looks really good, right? You have him sort of halt to a stop, right, and begin to turn around, which this animation also looks really good, right? You have, ooh, that's a nice close-up shot there, too. Like, look at how nice these assets look, dude. Oh my gosh, they look so good. It looks so good. Oh my gosh. Such a nice shot right here. We have him twist around, and the animation on this entire sequence right here just looks so nice, right? Like, that looks pretty good, but then once we get to here, right, like him turning around with the cape moving and everything like that, oh man, that looks so good. We have him knock into Piccolo now again with a do effect, and I think they nailed the aesthetic of this scene very well with all these like comic book-esque effects. You can even see the lighting effects on his fist there, right? Interesting cut here, by the way, where they just sort of cut to Piccolo flying away. But I mean, I suppose that that's a decent place to do it because your eye's already kind of looking at Piccolo in this position. So then immediately having it cut to here, right, where he is sort of in the same position but flying away, right, I think feels a little bit more natural to the eye for sure. So then, after this, you have Gamma 2 fly up and flip around, which this also looks really nice. Interesting that they cut to this angle here, but yeah, this looks really good too, right? I like that they blur the asset here as well to sort of emphasize the movement on that, right? And then he smacks into Piccolo with the beautiful sort of effects going on here again as well, coming off of his foot too, the bish in the background. And then you have Piccolo fly down, which this looks really cool. The only thing that is a little bit stinky about this is obviously the sprite feels a little bit weird in terms of the size, and especially with this trying to be the sprite colliding with the rocks as it's, you know, breaking apart is a little bit weird, but the rock effects and the smoke effects look really, really good. And I think that they absolutely nail it with that, right? You have him sliding down the mountain at a very cool angle, by the way. Definitely have to point that out, right? It feels pretty 3D, to be honest with you, in the way that it looks. Like, you actually feel like he's going down the mountain. And a very nice faraway shot of the smoke, right? And it is a cool piece of detail, too, that they actually have the smoke already there, excuse me, because, of course, right, you saw him flying down the mountain for a little bit. So, of course, there would already be the smoke and dust clouds there. So that's really cool, and you have them sort of make contact with the ground, obviously, with a little bit of the shake and the dust plume at the bottom, which also looks really, really nice. We also have, of course, the finishing shot. Now, I'll talk about what I wanted to talk about that sequence, because, you know, we're kind of done with it at this point. They did such a good job with the sprite. I can't believe I just said that. But wow, ladies and gentlemen, the sprite actually did a very good job in this section. It almost kind of feels like they designed this essay around the sprite, because this is the one time that I can say for basically the whole animation, except for the part where, you know, Piccolo's sliding down the mountain, I guess, the animation actually feels like the sprite fits, right? This pose where Gamma 2 is punching into Piccolo, right? That definitely feels like it fits how it actually looks in the scene, right? You have him reacting to getting hit, which is okay, right? But then when he gets hit again, right, this shot looks perfect, right? Again, fitting perfectly with the sprite. They nailed it on that for sure. And then the next one, right, where he kicks down, they use this one, which is where the character collides with the screen, right, the glass at the end when they get KO'd. But it fits really well for this. So it almost feels like they actually thought this through a lot more with the sprite, rather than kind of just slapping the sprite's 3 frames on there and calling it a day, right? They actually did a really good job incorporating it into this animation, which is super nice to see, because usually I feel like that's not the case. All right, so here we go with when things get crazy with Gamma 2, okay? This is when things go wild. So we have him get ready to pull out the blaster, right? Which this whole sequence looks really nice. Again, sort of that 2.5D effect going on here once again, right? He gets ready to fire, and oh my gosh, the rotoscoping, dude. The rotoscoping here is so good. Look at this. Okay, so we got to start at the beginning, right? You have it start here. And this literally just looks like it's a screenshot right out of the movie, by the way. This shot just looks so nice. This is clearly where they put a lot of the budget, right? The focus is very, very good in here. First of all, the effect on the blaster looks really nice as this forms, but you can see the very nice rotoscoping effect. Rotoscoping, if you're unfamiliar, by the way, basically means when 2D images look like they're in 3D, but it's just the effects that they use to give it that effect. And that's exactly what's happening here. It literally looks like the camera is turning around Gamma 2. in this beautiful sequence, right? It literally just looks like it's a 3D model, and that's not the case. That is simply them using the assets in such a way to make that look, you know, like it's in 3D, which is super cool. Again, the effect on the actual blaster looks really nice. Ooh, that's a sick impact frame. And he fires it off. A good way to transition between poses as well, obviously masking it with the impact frame, right? You have it fly down, and obviously we transition into the card art, which it's a bit of a shame that they didn't have like the card art up here. Where would that have been? Like in between here maybe, because obviously this is more akin to the pose that he's hitting there when, you know, it is fired and now he looks like that. But it's okay, it's a little bit nitpicking if I'm being honest with you, right? The card art looks really, really good. And you obviously have the ball fly down towards the ground, and once it makes impact, you can see a little bit of the blast sort of like changing shape, which is a nice touch, and then the explosion effect to follow with, of course, the Dokkan, and of course the smoke cloud on the bottom. You can also see the water moving, which is a super great attention to detail there. Definitely they did not have to look, or they did not have to look, they did not have to do that, but that is a very nice attention to detail. The only thing that I think is a little bit of a shame, right? The only thing that I wish they would have included with these animations is for his intro animation, instead of it starting with him spinning around the blaster, do you remember when he sort of comes in as the ball of energy with the eyes, right? When he first lands down and attacks Piccolo, right? Where it kind of looks like his blaster blast, but it's him moving so quickly that he looks like the little energy ball with the eyes, right, from the trailer. I wish they would have included that, because that would have looked so cool, but that's okay. I just wanted to point that out because obviously we're talking about it. But man, overall, his look really, really good. I think they did a fantastic job on them overall. I definitely think the intro is the most janky one because a lot of the posing in there is kind of a little bit weird looking. But yeah, Gamma 2's animations overall look really, really good. Let's go on to Gamma 1's now. So the intro, again, funny enough, is sort of the weakest one for Gamma 1 here. Sorry, I had to take a drink of water. Hydrate or dihydrate, baby. So with him, right, this looks okay. It doesn't look too bad. The weird thing that I saw immediately with this animation, right, was two things. One, his legs. So first of all, focus on his legs, right? They look a little bit weird as he takes steps forward, right? Like there's not enough animation in between some of the steps, right? They kind of like jerk a couple of times, right? When he takes a step, they sort of like almost crack into place, right? And there is a little bit of them doing, excuse me, that sort of like kind of yoinking the corners of the assets to kind of make them move a little bit, it looks like. So that looked a little bit weird to me personally, right? Like his walking animation definitely looked a little bit weird, right? And then when some of the shading shifted on some of these too, like here you can see this is so bright, right? And then it shifts to like this. That's also a little bit jarring. I understand they're trying to like match the shading of the scene. But yeah, it looks a little bit weird. I think it doesn't help that his pants are really baggy on the top half. So kind of like having this giant section here rub past this other section in an instant, right? Maybe that's why they did that, because they didn't know how to animate it, like pushing past the other part. Still looks a little bit weird, right? Let's talk about the top half of Gamma 1 now. So the actual animation of him putting his fist together looks pretty good, right? Unfortunately, there is a little bit of a jump in the very beginning, right? You can see him raising his hands, which looks good. And then immediately they go up to here, which is a little bit janky for sure. But once he actually slams his hands together, that looks pretty good. Obviously, it makes sense that that would be a quick and snappy movement because, of course, it fits how it's supposed to look, right? The overall look of him, though, does look very, very nice, if I do have to say. It is a little bit weird, too, because this is the part where he's getting ready to fight Gohan, and they were not, like, in this section of the Red Ribbon Army base, because this almost looks more like when they're underground, like when Piccolo and Gamma 2 are underground fighting. That's kind of what this looks more like to me. I guess maybe they were going for like the underside of like the area where Pan is standing in this scene, but it still definitely wasn't here because all the characters are standing in an open area in front of the base. Maybe it's just because they didn't know how to implement that without putting the characters in the background and making it feel empty. I don't know. They've done that for Broly's animation though, where he charges forward from the ship when he sees the Saiyan. So I don't know. Very interesting thing to note there. But with the top half of Gamma 1, right, he removes his hands, which looks okay, right? The actual part where he pulls them apart looks fine. I think they did a pretty good job of getting the part where, you know, you would want it to be moving quickly. I think that one's not too bad. As he moves his hands apart and walks forward, he punches them together again. And then you can see his face will change here in just a moment, right? His hands open up a little bit, which is interesting. You can see his fingers go from sort of this like closed around his hand, right, to them being open a little bit there. And his head changes immediately, right? I think this would look less weird if his eyes were still focused on the viewer, right? I understand he's sort of trying to do like the neck crack thing, right? That's like kind of what he's doing here. But I think this would look a lot less awkward if his eyes were still focused on the camera, right? Because obviously you have this really interesting like shot where you're sort of looking from the ground up, I guess would be the best way to describe this. And it sort of looks like he's looking at you in this beginning, maybe over your head. But here, right, once it transitions to his head like this, it almost looks like he's looking up, right? This does kind of fit with the fact that he is an android, I guess, because he's a little bit more robotic and not as natural moving, but I don't know if they really thought it through that much. Maybe they did. If they did, then props to them. But I feel like it still looks a little bit weird animation-wise. And then him immediately shifting his head to the other side too, right? That part is a little bit like, I feel like there should be a couple more frames in between that for sure. Okay. So then we have him move his head to the other side, which, funny enough, that part is actually animated really well, which is sort of ironic, right? When he's actually tilting his head, there are plenty of frames in that. And then even when he tilts it back, right? That looks just fine to me, right? I think that that looks perfectly normal, honestly. Okay, so we now have him stand. I gotta say, this is a very awkward jump. Not just the angle that we're at here, obviously looking from sort of the ground up to Gamma 1, then immediately going here is just so jarring, right? I guess they kind of try and do a transition by having it raised up a little bit, but it really doesn't look that good in my opinion. And the other thing that's so weird too is that I feel like the shading on him here is a lot different than the shading on him here. He looks a lot more Dokkan-esque in this shot, and I feel like he looks a lot more like the CG style in this shot. Very, very interesting stuff. This is probably the part that I dislike about this animation the most easily, right? They just have him talking, right? No mouth movement, which, I mean, it's kind of hit or miss with active skills, but lately I feel like they've been doing a good job of that, so it's kind of weird that that wouldn't be the case. But the fact that they just zoom in on the asset, right, and have the speed lines feels so lazy to me. And the other thing that makes me feel like this is so lazy is that they didn't make a higher quality asset for this, right? This asset is pretty high quality, but when they zoom in here on him, right, they should have had a asset that was even higher quality at the ready if they're going to zoom in on it, right? You never zoom in on an asset that's low quality because it'll end up looking not that great. Now, this is certainly not the lowest quality asset that I've ever seen zoomed in on Dokkan Battle. Oh, no, sir. Those sprites would like a word. But I definitely wish, you know, that it was a little bit different for the intro animation. But moving on, we, of course, have the attack. I believe I think it's a counter or nullification, regardless, right? This animation where Gohan fires his blast at him, we have the cut-in from Gamma 1, and this is a very interesting intro section. I didn't actually see this in the beginning. Okay, so a little bit of like a white star forming, almost, which is kind of an interesting effect here. Definitely a little bit weird for sure, but of course this is supposed to be him getting hit back. By the way, the red ribbon looks so good there. That's really cool. You have Gamma 1 getting hit back, right, which I think they did a pretty good job on him actually falling down, right? Overall, I think this looks really nice, right? His legs sort of going up in the air a little bit. It is a little weird that they have him change pose there so quickly, right? I feel like there should be a little bit more in between that, but definitely not too bad. The animation on him falling here is really good. This feels super natural in the way that his body is sort of like going limp a little bit almost, right? That looks really nice. You then have the transition with the background sort of moving a little bit to coincide with how you're looking at him falling, right? That does feel a little bit weird, but it's not too bad. You have him hit the ground and his head finally hit the ground as well with a little bit of a dust cloud there. I kind of wish there was a little bit more recoil on his head hitting the ground like it, because it almost kind of feels like somebody set him down nicely on the ground, holds him gently. I don't know. So I kind of wish that there would have been something there that would be a little bit more akin to, you know, him actually just having a little bit of recoil as he hit the ground, but not too bad, to be honest with you. So funny enough, I actually did not think that they were going to include this in the animations, because I was really curious how they were going to execute this with the sprites, right? Let me take another quick drink of water. Hydrate or dihydrate round 2, baby. Shout out to the person in the comment section, by the way, who said that they say that phrase too. I saw you in that other video, bro. That's my goat right there. Anyway, as Gamma 1 is now rising from the ground, I think the weird thing about this, because this looks pretty cool overall, right? It's the way that, like, the beginning of it is animated, right? That also looks a little bit funny out of context, I will admit. So, this part where he's moving up, first of all, it's kind of weird that the background is moving, right? Like, I feel like the background shouldn't be moving for this section. He also, like, grows a little bit, or they make the asset a little bit bigger, which is kind of weird. It's also a little bit strange the way that they execute his legs moving, right? Because this looks a little bit weird. Obviously, the whole way that it's supposed to be is, you know, he's on his heels and then he immediately, like, comes up and hits Gohan on the head. But it looks weird with the ground moving and his legs moving like this, because you don't get that same effect. Like, his feet haven't moved and only the top half of his body moved, like, on the tips of his heels, basically, right? It sort of ruins that illusion, right? Especially when they go from this to this, right? It's a little bit janky, if I'm being honest with you here. Funny enough, the assets themselves look really good throughout this entire sequence. It's just the way that they're executed into motion that looks a little bit janky, right? This part looks okay, though, with him rising. Again, I think the background moving like this also makes this feel a little bit weird, right? And then you have this transition to his head coming up a little bit, where they kind of just, you raise me up, where his head just sort of comes into view, right, over his body there a little bit. And then you have this very quick transition of him going from bam to bam, right, immediately going from this to already kind of being, you know, whipped up, I guess, right, like whipping his body up. And then they zoom in on his face to then have his face be immediately in view. I really wish they would have had some motion lines on his head, right? To sort of emphasize him zooming it forward, right? Or maybe just had a couple more frames in between of his head moving forward rather than it just being a frame by frame, right? I think his head is also a little bit elongated here. Maybe this is just me, but his head definitely feels a little bit like too long here. Then, of course, funny enough, the anime speed lines are there, though. We have him whip his head forward into frame, right? This is, of course, the shot where him and Gohan are smacking into each other, right, with their craniums. And I'm glad that they included this. Obviously, this shot is weird for a lot of reasons. Well, I mean, this just looks kind of weird out of context, if I'm being honest with you. But this is weird because, obviously, in this shot, the two characters are sort of clashing heads, right? Gamma 1 and Gohan, like, knock each other in the head with the headbutt. But the other thing that I think is a little bit off-putting about this, too, is that this section of the fight takes place in the rain, right? This is when they first arrive and the sky is dark, and then it's raining when Gamma 1 brings himself up like that. So it's also a little bit weird that they chose the sunny background, because obviously since the background is specifically from the scene that this is referencing, and it's like a different background that they teleport you to basically for this attack, Why not just make it the darkened skies? I don't really understand why they didn't decide to do that. I guess I understand not doing the rain, because that's really complicated to do, and especially having the rain look good, sort of pitter-pattering against their body. Yeah, I guess I understand why they didn't do that, because that is very difficult to do. Funny enough, they made that look pretty good with the AGL Gohan. Someone pointed out that that actually happens in the essay, and I just didn't even notice it, which, good eye. I'm glad you in the chat, you in the comments section are getting a good eye for these things as well. But yeah, that is just something that's kind of strange to me about this whole sequence as well. Obviously, that they didn't just do that. Like, I understand not doing the rain, I guess, right? If that was too difficult for them to do, like, yeah, sure, whatever. But just not having the sky be dark, maybe they just wanted the, like, super attacks to just have a brighter, like, aesthetic? I don't know. It's just very weird to me that they didn't go with that. But anyway, this section of Gamma 1 lifting his head forward looks okay. It is a little bit weird because it's basically just a static PNG until the end, where you can see he actually does move his head a little bit, right? You can kind of see the recoil on his head as he clangs with the enemy. It is definitely a very weird shot, though, like this, right? We have Gohan fly back 2 with this nice little white effect that you see on the screen here to sort of emphasize him smacking into him, and he spins and hits the screen. Not going to say anything about the sprite because obviously, you know, sprites will be sprites. This is the AGL Gohan sprite, by the way, nothing new. Unfortunately. Okay, so now we move on to the big kahuna here, the super attack animation. I think that the beginning of him walking forward kind of does look a little bit janky, but the rest of this animation, oh baby, it looks good. So, his arms do look a little bit stiff as he's walking forward for this. This is also another section too where I feel like it's a bit of a mix of that Dokkan aesthetic style and also them trying to mimic the movie, right? It's not perfectly one or the other. It's sort of a mix between. But yeah, I think that that's a problem with this section. First of all, his body moving like that is really weird. I always hate it when they do this in animations. I've seen this before where they sort of have their bodies, like their chest, almost twist in a really jank way. Funny enough, the AGL Super Saiyan Goku and Vegeta from the Cooler movie, I believe, did this. Goku's chest did that at one point in the animation. I think that was actually when he throws the ball at Metal Cooler, funny enough. But yeah, never really a fan of this because the perspective change is so weird. Like, look how much of the side of Gamma 1's body is showing here. And then immediately, right, it's going to, like, basically none of it showing at all with the same, basically, arm asset in view. I don't know. It's just always really weird when they do that. But yeah, definitely his arms look a little bit stiff in this beginning section, to say the least. I will say, again, I'm not sure if it's stiff because they're trying to mimic Android movement. If that's the case, then Bandai knocked it out of the park, I guess. If that is really what their intention was. But I don't know if they, like, thought that deep into it, right? There is an interesting part here where Gamma 1's head changes a little bit. Where was that? Yeah, here. The shading on his head changes a little bit, which is kind of interesting that they did that, right? I feel like that didn't really need to happen, but, I mean, it's okay. Alright, so then, though, once we get to this section, basically once we change from this angle, right, to this angle of the now side look to him, it almost kind of feels like they were trying to do rotoscoping here, but they just didn't go all the way, or they didn't know how to do it for this, which is weird because a lot of the other sections in the other one, and you'll see later on in this one, they have rotoscoping, so it's kind of weird that they, you know, skipped a couple of, like, twists and turns to just kind of have him change poses like this. But once he gets into this pose, I think this looks a lot better, especially with him now bringing his arms up, right? And him running actually looks really, really nice here. I think this looks pretty cool. It's very nice how they blurred him out a little bit as well. Obviously, that looks really cool to sort of emphasize the speed that he's going at. I like as well that he is in sort of this like running stance, right, as he's going. But he actually sort of gets a little bit deeper into it, right? You can see slowly but surely his body is sort of moving down into it before he's like completely head down, right, running forward. The other thing I will say is a little bit odd about this section is that his face looks a lot more normal like here, right? This looks a lot more akin to how he looks in the movie. But then when he gets to, where is it? Right here. He looks a little bit squish-headed. Like he almost looks like he has a more chiseled chin, like a smaller face. I don't know. It is kind of weird that they changed the look of that. I guess it's just to obviously fit with him getting a little bit more of a serious look, but I think it looks a little bit weird. But it's not like crazy or anything like that. Okay, so this is pretty cool too. Obviously, this far away shot with him running forward, and it actually looks like he's running, which is nice. As well, of course, they blur him out because, you know, makes sense with him running here. Again, by the way, bright skies when this is in the section when he's running, so kind of weird on that one. But yeah, you have it zoom in. I will say it is a little bit of a shame that they didn't just switch between the assets there, and it's just the one and the other one of the same, right? I kind of wish they would have had his legs start moving there rather than this frame, but that's okay, right? The actual running animation for him charging forward looks pretty good, and him actually moving forward and whapping Gohan in the face looks good. Again, I like that they sort of blur it for a little bit. I think that's really cool, and you can actually see it come back into focus as well, which is super nice, right? It's harder to tell in the sprite because, of course, you know, sprite's stinky 24/7 anyway, but Gamma 1, right, you can clearly see how blurry it is before it actually gets into this higher quality detail, which is cool. Now, this is a little bit weird that they go from this to this, right? That is definitely a pretty severe cut to jump from one to the other, especially stylistically. The pose is kind of the same, but obviously his hand is now open in the background. You have the follow-up attack, right? This looks pretty good. I think this sequence is very nice in the beginning here. However, I will say I wish there was a little bit more like focus on throwing the actual punch against him. He also looks a little bit strange here, I will admit, like color-wise. Like, I guess the shading on his face definitely looks a little bit strange. The punch follow-through is definitely pretty good, though. They obviously have his fist move a little bit. And as Gohan flies away, you can obviously see that they have him, you know, actually follow through with the punch, which is very nice, too. Flying away, right? And you actually have his cape move a little bit there, which is pretty nice attention to detail too. The background's spinning around too, which is a nice little effect, right? I think for this it works a lot better, giving it that sort of realism, excuse me, that 3D. Again, sort of rotoscoping on the background, right? You have the sprite fly away into the sky with Gamma 1 flying forward. They are so lucky, by the way, that these guys do not have a bunch of flowing parts because they can get away with doing this a little bit easier. And they really haven't, which is kind of nice to see, just having them basically slide the PNG. But there are a couple of times where it's happened, and this is definitely an example of that where, you know, he basically just slides forward. But he does punch Gohan with a quick punch, which I think this looks good, right? You have these nice little yellow effects. And some actual recoil from this too, which is nice, right? You can see that he sort of moves a little bit with his whole body, and the cloak moves too. Then you have him follow through for a kick, which also looks really good too, right? I think that this transition of the poses here is fine in motion, right? I think it looks okay. You have him knee him up. And again, very nice minimal movement on the small parts here. You always love to see it. I hate it when they don't include that in modern animations. It just feels so lazy, right? Definitely a very nice touch there. And you have him begin to turn around, right? Which it looks a little bit choppy here, but again, I think in motion it looks just fine. The turnaround of this looks pretty good, if I do say so myself, right? And I think in the parts where they focus on the specific poses as well, they do a pretty decent job at rotoscoping and making it sort of feel 3D. It helps with the way that they move the background for this one too, right? Now focusing on this angle, because of course you're kind of looking at it from this angle now. Gamma 1 kicks down, teleports away, and here is where we have the clean section, right? Before that, though, we have him come down. It's nice to see that he actually, too, you know, sort of like pounces on the ground. I guess it would be recovering from the recoil as well, right? He goes down, readies up for the kick, and bam, knees him in the wherever that is on the sprite, because obviously, depending on the sprite, it'll be different. This text effect is also really cool, too. You have very smooth animation here, by the way. This is what I'm talking about. Whenever I say that Dokkan is missing frames in between or skips important poses that they do, look how fluid this is, right? Starting here with him putting his leg down, landing, and then throwing his arm forward, right? That entire sequence right there after the knee is so incredibly fluid. It looks like natural movement, right? Even the part where there's that little jump there. Here, so let's actually start from right here, right? With him kneeing him down, right? Him putting his leg down to the ground looks super natural, right? It lands. And this change in pose looks okay because of how quick he begins to move again, right? I think this looks fine, right? Moving his hand up again, right? And then getting ready to smack Gohan. So clean. The movement is so nice. As well, you have some smearing, which is nice too, to sort of emphasize how hard he's hitting them. And then it actually takes it off here, and there's a little bit of a recoil once he actually hits him too, which is nice. Sort of flying back a little bit from the impact, right? Very, very nice attention to detail. A super, super nice kick, right? Definitely like this little spin here. I think there could have been a couple more frames in between there for sure. But overall, not too bad. This asset, by the way, specifically, really looks like it's right out of the movie. Holy cow, that looks super nice. We have him kick Gohan away. And again, look at that minimal movement. It just looks so good, right? That looks really, really nice with him sort of coming down from that kick. Again, another very weird jump here, right? This is a very big jump going from this to this, right? In perspective in the scene, right? Very interesting. It kind of feels like that with Gamma 2, they had a lot more of a fluid animation, and maybe it's just because it was basically all one attack that they took from, where they kind of took this from different parts of the fight with Gohan, right? I don't know. It's just kind of interesting that it feels a little bit more like, not choppy, but like different sections mashed together. So, of course, we have him fly up, which it's nice to see that they have this good angle here, right? But then it actually kind of feels like that he's flying up with the way that his legs sort of move a little bit there. Kind of weird that they don't have the cape move for this section, but it is what it is, I guess. You then have him approach Gohan from this really interesting back angle before he slams into him here with these, I guess you would call this like air dust? Basically just like anime airlines when a character runs into another. And this is super cool. Now, this is really interesting because I believe, if memory serves, in this scene, you're a lot more closer up to them when they're dragging it, and then it sort of zooms out to this like farther away look. But they kind of have you far away for this whole section, pretty much for the entirety of the whole thing. And I gotta say, I don't think this looks bad at all, right? From them zooming it in and the background moving to them making impact with the rocks, right? You can also see, I know it's hard to tell, the asset is Gamma 1 flying towards the rock. And then he actually begins to move sideways, right? Because you can now see him from the back because you can see more of his cape before he runs into the rock. That is such an incredible attention to detail that I think most people probably won't notice. And they absolutely could have just had him fly into the rock and then do it. But that is such a nice attention to that little detail there, right? This effect looks super nice with the rocks flying off the dust. A little bit of a zoom out here too, which, interesting again, this is sort of like the angle that Pan and Piccolo would have been watching from, right? On the balcony. Again, this does feel a little bit weird because, of course, it was nighttime during this scene. So, of course, seeing this in this bright is a little bit strange. But, yeah, this looks super good as he's dragging him against the rock. This looks cool. We then have it go over to him actually pushing Gohan through the mountain here, right? Or, I guess, against it more like. The debris looking very good. The little bit of minimal movement on Gamma 1 looking very good as well. You can actually see that it zooms in a slight bit to this, which is really cool too. You have this effect sort of burst off of them, right, as he throws him away. My man looking like Sonic the Hedgehog out here, bro. His cape sort of wrapped around him, right? That is very funny. My man is My man literally did. I'm sorry, I'm not a Naruto head, but you know that one scene where the villain in Naruto like swipes his hand and he disappears under his hand? That's exactly what this reminds me of. That is pretty funny. Yeah, so obviously Gamma 1 appears here, right? Very nice minimal movement on the cape here. And again, this sort of has that 2.5D effect as well on the look of Gamma 1 here. It immediately transitions into a higher quality sprite as well. You can see that, you know, obviously with the darker lines, right? That sort of emphasizes the smaller sprites, right? When they have them like this, you can see that they're a little bit more high quality. Usually that's kind of how they stylize it in Dokkan. This is a pretty cool little piece here, right? Where we go from this to then zooming in on his face a little bit. And then, again, sort of a 2.5D look there before going back to that little bit of a lower quality sprite. As he spins around to grab his gun. Oh, that's a really intense look. Holy cow. This, I think this whole little spin section here also looks really nice, right? Like this in full motion looks super sick, for sure. They definitely animated that very well. As well, just with the gun being pulled out, right? I think they did a good job of when he actually, whips it out. Then the bam, and he sort of sets into position. That is so nice because they literally just could have had him just get into the position where it's forward rather than that little bit of minimal movement at the end. You love to see that attention to detail. Holy cow, that is a scary face. So yeah, we have this very nice zoom up of Gamma 1, right? It zooms out from him again. I believe this is another shot from the trailer, right? This looks excellent. Again, this looks right out of the movie. It literally looks like, excuse me, they took his model and slapped it right into Dokkan. This looks absolutely fantastic. Here you can see the cape is still moving in the background too, which is really nice. See? They had a perfect transition for the card art for Gamma 1. Why did they do it for Gamma 2? I don't know. But it's literally when he's readying up the shot and charging it up, right? And not to mention, I have to say before we go back and look at Gamma 1 actually in full here, they use the blast as a transition on the card. Are you kidding me? Look at this, dude. The blast engulfs the screen and it transitions to the card. How cool is that? That is probably the most nerdy thing I've ever said in an animation analysis video. But gosh dang it, is that sick. Holy cow, ladies and gentlemen. You love to see it. Okay. So talking about how this actually looks, again, the close-up itself looks good. It does look kind of weird with just having this super big close-up and then a little bit farther out and then pretty far out there. But in full motion, it looks perfect, right? Actually, I'm going to play it in full motion in a minute, right? But all of the emotion in him, the angle here, right? All of it is perfect. It looks exactly like Superhero. The effect on him looks great, right? Him actually getting into position here also looks really nice with sort of the way that his body stretches too. Oh, man, it is such a nice shot for sure. They definitely spent their time on these sections where they charge up the blast. I mean, I guess that makes sense because obviously that's the card art. So, of course, that's the section that they want to focus on. Look how good that spin looks, by the way. Yeah. So nice, right? They look so good in those two sections for the both of them. That's obviously the part that they spent the most time on, which makes sense, of course. Okay, so then we transition into the blast being shot from him, right? Which looks really, really good, right? I think that the electricity effects here look very nice. You have the sound effect shoot off too, with a little bit of a perspective change as it's sort of, you're looking from him from a distance to now sort of being like next to him, because obviously you can see the wall changes, right? The wall also moving along with it, which looks cool. I love the effects on the blast as well. They look really, really nice, right? I think they nailed it with the way that their blast look from their blasters too in these animations. They look so good. You have it fly towards the enemy, right? In this very cool little like I don't really know how to describe it. It's just the way that it moves feels so natural and looks a lot like the movie, right? It's a lot better than them just literally doing a stinky blue circle or a stinky red circle, right? You see those all the time for animations, right? In Dokkan, even in modern animations. And you're telling me they can animate a blast like this, right? Kamehamehas don't even look this good half the time. They killed it with this, right? So it envelops the enemy, and again, a fantastic transition here, right? You have it make contact with the enemy, blast into white, right? As it sort of takes over the screen here, you get into the middle of the blast, and then it transitions from a fade into the background here, right? With, you can see the background and obviously the explosion effect firing off there, the pink engulfing the screen, and the explosion there coming off of where it hit. Ooh, some very nice dark colors in there as well to sort of emphasize that, like the smoke coming off of that too. Such a good transition there into the explosion from that little bit of the front of the blast there, right? Colliding with the enemy character. That's such a good transition. And the explosion at the end looks really good too. Okay, so that is Gamma 1 and 2's animations. Overall, these are really, really nice looking animations for sure. I think there is no denying that. I am really, really happy with the way that these turned out. As we talked about in the video, there are definitely some areas that I think that they could have improved on, some little things that they definitely could have done, but I think overall they really got the aesthetic and the feel of superhero, as well as the sort of feel of these characters as well. I love the way that they incorporated different aspects of superhero and these characters into this. I love the rotoscoping that they did in here with the blast sections of this. Just look so fantastic, right? They absolutely nailed that part for sure. And especially with Gamma 2, I really like the sort of attention to detail with kind of making the sprite match up to him. It's also weird seeing this Gohan actually in the rain and then transitioning to Gamma 1 sections of this that should be in the rain, right? But it's in this clear sky. I think overall, I definitely like Gamma 2's animations a little bit more, right? I think the end of Gamma 1's are really solid, right? I think overall they're both really good, but I definitely prefer, I think, these sort of sound effect bits. Although everything from when he slams him into the rock to the finishing of this animation for Gamma 1 is literally peak. So, I don't know. I'm very conflicted on which one I like better, but I think overall, I like Gamma 2's animations better. I think they kind of fit a little bit better, and there's a little bit less jank overall. Like, especially with Gamma 1's counter animation being where he slams his head forward, right? I'm glad that they included it because I really wanted them to, but obviously with the way that the sprites are and the way the game works, it's a little bit harder for them to properly implement that sort of thing. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know what you think about these two in the comment section below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. I am very excited to summon for these guys. And bro, if these guys look this good, I can only imagine not only when they get a dual LR, because you know that they are saving Gamma 2's sacrifice for a exchange LR with these two, but Gohan Beast and Orange Piccolo, oh baby, they are gonna be insane if these guys already look this good. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.